I'd like to ask everyone to stand while we have the presentation of colors by the Travis County Constable Precinct 2 office. And if you'll remain standing while we do the pledges and the invocation, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honored the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this day and for each blessing that you've given us. Lord, we ask that you be with our state leaders as they are in session. Lord, we ask that you give them wisdom and guidance and that their decisions are pleasing to you. Lord, we ask that you be with us today as we make decisions. Give us clarity and that we do things and give glory to you. Lord, forgive us where we fail you. Be with our brothers and sisters that are out. We ask for a hedge of protection over them. And for those families that are left, Lord, we ask that you give them comfort and guidance. Forgive us where we fail you. In Jesus' name we do pray. Amen.
Amen.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Burris, for the pledges and Commissioner Hester for the invocation. And again, wanted to go ahead and recognize the Travis County Constable Precinct 2 Honor Guard. We had with us today Senior Deputy Arnold Carrera, Deputy Ben Coe, Senior Deputy Ryan Taylor, Sergeant Greg Paez, and Lieutenant Michael DeLeon. Let's give them a round of applause. They did a fantastic job. We certainly appreciate them and all of the different departments that support us with their honor guards. Welcome, everyone. It's good to see everyone. My apologies for having to have canceled the February meeting, but the weather just would not cooperate. I know we waited to the last minute hoping that the weather forecasts were maybe wrong, but instead they actually, I think the weather throughout the state just continued to worsen. So out of caution and safety, we had to cancel the February meeting, but we are here today. We have lots to cover, including some of that from from the February meeting, so we will go ahead and get started. We're going to move to agenda item number 2, which is the approval of the minutes from the December 15th meeting. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. And I'm sorry, I need to go back to Sarah and do the roll call.
Commissioner LaValle,
Here.
Commissioner Hester,
Here.
Commissioner Burris,
Here.
Commissioner Hart,
Here.
Commissioner Atkins,
Here.
Commissioner Griffiths,
Here.
Commissioner Lozano,
Present.
Commissioner LaValle Wilson,
Here.
Commissioner Berry.
Present.
And we do have a quorum. So we'll move to agenda item number 3, and I'm going to turn it over to our interim director, John Beecham.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Good to see everybody here, be back at the Pickle Center. I want to thank staff and everyone for putting it back together, and I'm getting used to the new chairs and the new surroundings here. I didn't know which room I was in when I walked in here today, so it's a new experience, but I will say it's more comfortable. Commissioners, as we discussed yesterday, we're currently in session, as we all know, most recently, and certainly Director Grigsby will go into more detail during her portion of today's presentations. Most recently, the TCOLE sunset bill was voted out of the Senate earlier this week. Next week, it will begin its journey through the House, and we will continue to attend hearings, speak as a resource for the agency in relation to the many bills that are pending that are related to TCOLE and law enforcement. And we look forward to continuing working with the legislature and all of our regulated community and constituents as we move through and move towards the end of the session. I'll reserve any other comments that we have until as we go through other directors' reports.
And we will move on to credentialing, education, and field services, please.
Good morning, Commissioners. In your packet, you should have a report from Education, Credentialing, and Field Services. We're happy to welcome on board Kimberly Bloss as a new instructional designer. Just started within the last couple of weeks, and she has already hit the ground running. The Education Services is still working on newsletters, trying to get them out monthly to keep people abreast of what's happening in terms of curriculum and education service projects. We went from about 400 subscribers for the first newsletter to now we're over 1,500 subscribers, and so that's one of the means by which we're implementing communication strategies. Recently sent out a survey to previous attendees at the TCOLE conference, trying to narrow topic areas that the regulated community wants to see presented at their conference. We're in the process of wrapping up the outcome of that survey and trying to narrow some of those things. We will be putting out a formal request for proposals to folks who would like to present topics at the upcoming conference in October. And we're assembling a committee from the training community to help us dice and select those proposals when they come in. So more to follow on that. With cardiac emergency communications, I did want to report that since the April 1 launch, as of April 1, we've had 842 enrollments and 724 completions on the My TCOLE version of the cardiac emergency communications. I do want to remind the regulated community that we are not seeking compliance in the 21-23 unit, the first unit in which all telecommunicators must comply with the CPR and cardiac emergency communications requirement is the 23-25 unit, which will start in September. We've gotten a lot of questions on that. Other projects include staff working on the stress management, officer wellness, and suicide prevention online course development. We hope to have that up and available on my TCOLE in August. We hope to pilot it in July for an August launch. With licensing examinations, I do want to report that our staff in our Austin Test Center proctored 541 licensing exams. That number was striking to me. I didn't realize we did that many exams in our test site. You should have two graphics in your binder that kind of explain workload, and Rachel Reinhardt provided those for Education Services. Be happy to answer any questions that come up on those, where we are on some of those projects. The stats for the credentialing phone queue, again, we're still hovering around 2% call abandonment rate. And I know Commissioner Hester, that's a metric you're keen on. The number of forms that are processed, reactivations remain about the same in terms of volume. And both of our new field service agents have completed their field training for Region 5 with Henry Elkin and Region 6 with Glenn Stone. So they are both out doing the work of the commission autonomously, and happy to have them on board, already getting good reports of their value and technical assistance to the field. That's the basis for my report. If you have any questions, be happy to answer them.
I've got one, sir. Where are we at on the officer suicide prevention awareness curriculum that?
That's the one that we're hoping to launch in August on my TCOLE. So we've got several modules complete, working on subsequent modules, also working on the programming to put it online. Along with the online development, there will be an IRG, so a regional academy or a training provider can take it and deliver the topic face-to-face. They can deliver it in their normal manner within their system, localize some of the content to their local resources, because one of the drawbacks to statewide training is it's hard to talk about mental health assets in 254 counties. So it does give a local agency the ability to take that base curriculum and then flesh it out for their employees in their region.
Awesome. Thank you so much for working on that.
Thank you.
Colin, yes, I was going to ask the same question about the wellness. I don't know if this is on or not.
It is.
Okay. But also I noticed in the report, the trauma-informed approach to sexual assault. You mentioned that it's in its final stages. What I'm going to ask is, well, there's already 4070 on the website, which is trauma-informed, the same title. Are you just going to replace that curriculum, or are you creating a whole new program?
What we're actually doing is working with the Sexual Assault Task Force out of the governor's office. We're partnered on that, and Gretchen may have more to speak to on that. We're updating the existing curriculum, both
Okay.
the 407 and the 4070 curriculum, as well as the components of trauma-informed investigation in the BPOC. So we're working with the task force across all three of those platforms to update it in what we believe to be newer, better information than in the original.
Okay, because I'm actually hosting one in May from this 4070, and we're on board to go ahead and present that. And I just want to make sure I've understood that if you take it now, that 4070, it will satisfy, even though you won't get credit for the hours in the new training unit, but it will satisfy that mandate that we're going to require everybody to have it in the next training unit. Is that correct, or am I?
Yes, ma'am. It is anticipated that that would be one of the courses we would require under the 16 hours from last legislative session. If a student took your course, that would suffice because we see it as a one-time event. So
Okay.
if you teach it in May on the current curriculum and the new curriculum comes out in July, your students would get full faith and credit for that event.
Okay.
We're just trying to refresh and renew the curriculum on a normal cycle.
Well, and I noticed that curriculum is 24 hours, so I don't know if you're with the 16-hour, if that's going to be something that we're going to change the hours on or not, but,
Well, there's an option of one or the other. There is the smaller, I believe it's 407, and that isn't, ma'am? 470, sorry.
okay.
But either of those will suffice.
Okay.
The 24-hour course obviously has more content, but either of those would be equivalent.
Okay, all right, appreciate it, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I just have one comment sexually related to the strategic plan with the Q phone calls. I think I recall that what we have as we're working on things, maybe I think we have a 10% metric for an abandoned phone call rate. So this is an example where I would say, based on our discussion yesterday, I would say, okay, guys, let's put 3%, something like that. This is already being achieved. So just a heads up on that.
Madam Chair. I know I've had some discussions internally, but I just want to make sure, when we're talking about L1s and forms and documents, and when we're making changes to those, when they get accepted, when they don't, what I would ask is that when you make form changes and say, hey, this is the drop dead date of forms, that we're not going to accept it past a certain time. For, like my agency, larger agencies, it's a lot to change things in the stream, mid stuff. So I know we've made some changes with that, but I just ask that we get more on a kind of a cycle of form changes, and maybe end of fiscal year or calendar year where it's a little bit easier to keep up with. So, and then the metrics on the 2%, you're never going to know if that 185 that were abandoned turned around and called right back again anyway. So, but this is very good and very good information. Thank you. I don't have anything else, Madam Chair.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you very much, Colin, and we'll move on to Jessica, Information Technology and Special Services Report.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'd like to start off with talking about Target 100. In March, we released a new feature in the My TCOLE account called My Compliance. And this new tab lets you log into your account and see exactly where you stand in your unit training requirements. If you're compliant, it will tell you you're compliant. If you're not compliant, it will tell you specifically what you need to become compliant. If you're short hours, it'll tell you how many hours you need to take. If you need a specific course, it'll tell you what that course is. And it's all real time. We mailed out Target 100 notification letters to departments on March 14th, and then followed that up with an email to department heads. The following week, we emailed individuals, both working and not working. This is actually the first time that we've ever reached out to unappointed license holders to let them know that if they don't do their training by the end of the training unit, their license will go inactive. And if that is intentional, which is acceptable, then we also provided them with the information they needed to see what it would be like to reactivate their license so they could make an informed decision. Something I'd like to point out, one of the complications we seem to find with some of the compliance issues is departments that carry a lot of reserve officers. And there seems to be a misconception that in order to keep your license active, you have to have your commission carried, at least as a reserve, and that's simply not true. You just need to keep your training up to date. So as long as you keep meeting your unit and cycle training requirements, your license will continue to remain active. And now that we have the My Compliance available through the My TCOLE account, it's easier than ever to stay on top of what you need and monitor and manage it. Now, in terms of Target 100, like where are we on that target? As of Monday, 84% of peace officers were in compliance, and 82% of telecommunicators are in compliance. Since we sent out that first round of notifications about a month ago now, we've seen 5,000 peace officers come into compliance and about 500 telecommunicators. So that's a lot of movement in 1 month. Now, in your notebooks on page 35, I put together some charts and information about what we've been tracking in terms of Target 100. I'd like to highlight a few key points. Prior to sending out the notifications, we sat down and identified some indicators that we wanted to watch and monitor to kind of measure the effectiveness of this new way of communicating with people. And of course, the very first thing we noticed once we sent out the communications was an extremely high call volume hit the day. If you can see it on the chart at the bottom of the first, on the bottom of page 35, there's a big spike on March 22nd. But what was really encouraging, if you flip a couple pages over, you can see the My TCOLE login activity and the charts that follow, the online training and the law update courses that were taken, they all have the similar spike. And what's notable, if you follow the white line across the middle of the chart, that's the monthly average. If you watch it, if you look at where the spike is and then you follow along, you can see the activity stays high after the spike happens. So the communications have really upped the activity in general. I think one remarkable aspect to point out here is the rebranding itself. We don't call this process non-compliance anymore. We call it Target 100 because that's our goal. We're hoping to achieve, we are going to achieve 100% compliance. And that might sound cheesy, but this positive spin has shown some observable and notable changes since the last unit and cycle. And a couple of them that I'd like to share is on the day that we had the large phone call increase, the energy and the activity around the office was a lot more positive. The type of phone calls that we were getting, of course, not everyone's happy, but in large part, people were responding very positively to the notifications, and we were hearing less talk about the nastygram from TCOLE and more about the Target 100 letter. And the other observation is when you talk to Lisa and the credentialing team, they've noticed that the content of their phone calls have shifted more towards helping people understand their resources rather than being the resource. I think it's really important for everyone here and the people listening to understand that this rebranding was intentional, that we wanted it to speak to how we're approaching things. And we wanted to create short and long-term benefits that weren't just for our own workload, but that would help agencies and licensees too. Long-term, we want to see agencies and license holders that are better versed in TCOLE policy and rules and far fewer enforcement cases and associated like disciplinary actions and appeals. In addition to just reducing our workload and just becoming a more effective TCOLE. We want to see less licensees who face reprimands or license suspensions and less agencies that are disrupted because of those licensees being suspended. Ultimately, this could reduce reactivations and SOA hearings, and definitely reduce our post-unit phone call volume. And it all ties back to our strategic goals, specifically with communicating more effectively and regularly. The next round of notifications is scheduled to go out in mid-May. A couple of other things, moving on, kind of tied to Target 100 is our racial profiling reporting, and we're really expanding that vision of Target 100 being compliance in general, not just unit and cycle compliance, but compliance. So racial profiling reporting is a portion of that, and that period closed up on March 1st. We ended on March 1st with 2 departments that reported late that day, and we still achieved 100% despite that, and I think the success of that reporting period is really attributed to a couple things. One, we own TCOLEs, but more importantly, the customer service that goes with it. So we've been able to be very responsive and timely with helping people get in there and file their report. And the other part is we were also very proactive in contacting these agencies. The FSAs were a huge help, and special services were on the phone constantly getting a hold of these agencies and saying, hey, I see you reported, last year you reported exempt. If you still meet that requirement, let me help you, let me walk you through how to get that in there. So these like proactive approaches and these effective communications are something that we really want to carry into our next strategic planning, and just kind of do a full strategic review of all of TCOLE's processes. Where can we identify places where we can simplify things, make them easier on our regulated community, and just automate and streamline. So I think that's going to strongly influence our upcoming strategic plan. And then finally, my one last thing. I'm so happy to report that the IT side of special services is finally fully staffed for the first time since we got those positions from legislation last session. We welcomed on Shruti Ashok as our newest developer, and John DeVega as our newest help desk team member.
Great news. It's like, yay.
Yeah, I know. Questions, comments?
I don't have a question. I just want to make sure that acknowledge the effort. I think that rebranding into us providing a positive spin on enforcing what needs to be done is such a good method, and I applaud just the return that we're getting.
I just had one question or comment regarding the reserve. That's always been something that I'm always promoting and letting people know. You do not have to have someone hold your commission to be able to go back in the business. So my question is, are y'all looking at maybe either, again, with the communication that we have, actually letting those chiefs and sheriffs know that this is the way it is? And even when you go to the chiefs conference or the sheriff's conference, making them aware that if someone comes and says, hey, I want you to hold my commission for me because I don't want to lose my license, that they know, hey, I don't have to, and that to just, again, to help departments who are kind of concerned with reserve officers, those kind of things, so.
Good. Pardon me. Commissioner, we talk about that routinely with the chiefs through our training at Lima and also the constables.
Okay.
The sheriff sometimes are a moving target. We try and get into venues where we can speak to them. And we do try and communicate that, but we have we have really good place with the chiefs and constables because Lima puts us in front of them to talk about those kind of things.
Okay, well, I just thought maybe, with the way we're sending emails, I'm assuming that y'all have email threads for just chiefs and sheriffs to say, hey, just word of note, this is something that you don't have to do, and just as far as that reserve status.
We're also working on a background guide because of there's still questions and problems with the background confirmation form and with the TSS process, and that's something that could be incorporated there, because I think that the process of appointing someone, even a reserve, has become much more complicated and time and expensive. So I think recognizing that as part of that process may help in some of those. But our real effort was to make sure everybody who is unappointed knows they're not required to, and I think that education, all of this, I think, will have long-term efficiency impacts, that we will have fewer reactivations, that we'll have fewer reserve officer applications, and it won't be by a tremendous amount, but it will free up resources across the board. And as people become more educated, we'll see a bigger impact.
Thank you. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I know Sunset Bill hasn't been done yet, but just pay attention to that so we can move quickly whenever that happens. But how many new license or new agency applications do we have pending right now? Do we know? I can't tell by looking at,
New
know we
for
have
agencies, right?
new agencies. Yeah,
Yeah.
it says we created new, I think in 9. I'm just wondering if there's any in the queue.
Oh, pending right
Yes.
now? I think we actually had an inspection that was scheduled for today. We always have several.
29?
I'm sorry, what?
Oh, she said 29. Okay.
Yeah.
Most of those are ISDs, I'm assuming? Okay. And I don't know whether this is appropriate or not, but if you look at some of the intent in what's going on downtown, should we put a moratorium on accepting those until after everything's done? Do we have the authority to do so?
I don't think we have the authority now, Commissioner Hester. However, I do agree with you that it's something to monitor. Obviously, if what you're referencing becomes effective, there'll be an effective date on it. I'm assuming September 1. What savings clause is put on that legislation hypothetically would be any agency who applied on or after this date it would apply to. It just depends. I don't necessarily know if we can base current actions on proposed future legislation.
Yeah, I know it's not about current, I just wonder what authority do we have to just stop, right? It's not an occupational license, right? I don't know if there's a right to have one created just because you want one. And as the regulatory agency, should we just say, you know what, for right now, no? And I'm just asking the question in general, so.
No, understood. It's a good question, and it's one we can take a look at.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Well, just to chime in, there's definitely been debate over historically, do we have that authority or not? And I think it's something that we would have to spend a lot more time looking at. It may be kind of a non-issue for us, something we don't really have to contemplate if legislation passes. So.
Agreed.
Thank you. I don't have anything else, Madam Chair.
No other questions or comments?
Oh, I just have one more comment. Jessica, I want to highlight that your materials in the notebook are fantastic. The notebook overall, guys, is fantastic. It is very informative. It answers questions that I'm having as I'm reading it, which is great. It really feels like you guys are anticipating that, some of the things in there we might be a little confused on. You give definitions. You do all these things that are helpful for public members, new members, seasoned members, commissioners, and it looks great. I really appreciate now that we're able to get some statistical information going, some data to back up what we have believed anecdotally over time. So it's looking fantastic, and I know the more that you all build out the system, the more information you're going to be able to glean from that information and bring to us. So this is obviously trending in the right direction. Overall, the ability for the individual officer to be able to get on and figure out exactly what his or her status is is phenomenal. You know, there's no more, well, I have to wait for my chief who's non-responsive, you know, someone in the department to tell me where I am. And it, you know, I guess technically we should all be keeping track of these things, but I don't do that for myself either. For the bar, I go on to the website, right? And I look, well, how many hours do I have? Am I compliant with this term or not? So we were so far behind something that's pretty basic that we should have, but obviously without the resources and the money from the capital, that wouldn't be possible. So thank you to downtown, your work for getting that, and the commissioner's work for getting the resources to be able to do this. So it's great, and I didn't want to let the day go by without thanking you all for the work. It looks great.
Can I piggyback on that? Just as a new commissioner and as a public member, I love the fact that in the 7 months that I've been here, 3 meetings, we're not taking baby steps, we're taking giant steps, and it's evident in that short amount of time. So I just want to thank you and the team as well, because I feel very knowledgeable in the areas where, like you said, that I was, you know, had questions about. The questions are answered. So thank you very much.
Okay, we'll move on to the enforcement report. TJ?
Good morning, Commissioners. And I want to reinforce the same. I really want to thank Jessica and her team. They always have more projects and resources, even though they're at 100%. When we started talking about Target 100, the goal was to have direct contact with all the appointed licensees. And then I thought we were stretching to also go to the unappointed, but when we realized that they could get my compliance in, and not only that, but get it in before that first communication so we could drive all of them there, that was a huge step in my mind. Again, it's a long-term solution. It's not the short-term patch that we've often done. And more exciting to me, I got a chief, he's in his 60s, he's an interim chief, he retired a long time ago, but he called me with questions because he'd checked his own my compliance on the chief's training. That's not our target audience, right? We know that the younger officers are trying to drive them there and get them to rely on it, but that tells me that not only are the officers in his department using it, he's using it. So that's encouraging. Those are some of the hardest groups to reach, right? These 7, 10-man departments, and get them all on the same page. And to see the number of calls we got, the good questions we got, and see how many people are using it is very exciting. We're headed towards a long-term solution. I spoke yesterday about the wrap-back subscriptions. We're working towards getting as many licensees subscribed as we can. We're well over 50%. We have a good baseline now. We know we have clean data. We've been finding ways to get batches of data from agencies. Yesterday, I talked with Commissioner Hester about maybe finding a more efficient way to get some data from DPS, so I think we'll look at that. But we have hired a third admin in enforcement, Rhiann Hurd. She's new to our team, and a big part of what that allows us to do is have an admin whose primary responsibility is working on wrap-back, on not just the hits that come in, but getting our subscription rate up, so we feel like we're headed the right direction with that. Before I forget, I want to recognize 2 other people. One of them is one of my sergeant investigators, Mike Hobbs, and then Lisa Landry, who's a credentialing supervisor. They both finished their FBI LEDA leadership trilogy here recently, since the last meeting. I've been encouraging other people to attend leadership training, but those 2 have finished all 3 courses. Lisa's a supervisor, and she has some responsibility. Mike Hobbs is one of the informal leaders in our agency, and I think having those skills is valuable to all of us. You can see the compliance numbers or the case numbers that we have. The one thing that has stood out to us recently is the number of BCF, the background confirmation form, and then the Secure Share portal complaints that we've had. We do have some cases which are going to result in discipline for agencies that are failing to do the background process that's laid out. And then we still have a lot of complaints that are more of education, particularly when it comes to TSS. Some of the agencies, the larger agencies, that are trying to find ways to integrate the TSS, especially if they have documents stored in multiple places. So as we get complaints, some of those get referred to enforcement. We've been working to educate and get compliance, particularly with those big agencies that it's more challenging. And then the last thing I want to talk about is the Target 100 efforts that Jessica talked about obviously are focused primarily on peace officers and telecommunicators that are required in this unit. But we're applying the same concepts more broadly. The chief's continuing education is on the same timeline. We've worked with LEMIT. We identified those chiefs who weren't signed up and didn't have the training. I've contacted all of them directly. All of them are now signed up, so they should complete the training by the deadline, and then we sent out a reminder email to everyone who is signed up to make sure they understood if they had to cancel or postpone that they would be in danger of not completing the training requirements. Our real focus is to do proactive communication, to make sure everyone understands what the expectations are and they can meet those. Those are more challenging in some areas. So a new chief has an introductory period that's based off when they got appointed. It's the rolling windows that make our job more difficult. We're trying to automate the process of notifying those people earlier. So what I've done is try to get a clean baseline. Everybody who was past the deadline, we've notified, we've got them on a plan, we've got a deadline for them. We identified a group of chiefs that are exempt and weren't flagged in our system, and so we've made it clear in our system that they're not subject to those new chief training requirements. And then we're working to get everyone caught up who is not compliant, and then start a process of regular notifying those who are in their first appointment as chief of police so they know what the expectations are. That same process will apply to sheriffs and constables and their licensing requirements. There aren't a tremendous amount of them, but those that are need to know what the expectations are as soon as they get appointed. So we're working on processes for those. And then the last and probably the most challenging training compliance that we deal with is there are still certain classes that interacting with deaf of hard of hearing, canine encounters. There are certain classes that are required by statute to be completed within 2 years of appointment. Those are now incorporated in the basic peace officer course. So all new police officers get that training. However, we had people who were reactivating who didn't have that training, or we have people who are coming from out of state or military and they're going through that don't require a BPOC, could get a license and not have those classes yet. And so then we have to try to monitor those over that 2-year window. So we have made adjustments so that those who are reactivating, we make sure they have the class and they have to complete it as part of the reactivation process. And then we're now adopting with those who are getting the out-of-state or the military or the special forces licensing process that they have to complete that at the initial point. Once we've done that, we've essentially closed the loophole, and we can get everybody who has not completed that training and has an active license caught up all at once. That keeps us from having to monitor this small group over a period of time. It's very an inefficient way to monitor license compliance. And so I think all of these things combined together will free up time and resources. That's all I have unless anybody has any questions.
Have you considered putting those classes in the supplemental peace officer course?
So,
I mean, since they're having to, a lot of them are having to do that supplemental, some of those?
and I'll give you a short answer, and then Cullen will give you the better answer because he knows better than I do. But
Okay.
my understanding is the supplemental peace officer can be done online. And so that's the challenge is some of those 5 classes have to be done in
Right.
person, the canine encounters and the CIT. And so the trick is how do we put those things together? It's my hope that some of the training providers who provide those classes will find ways to advertise it as a package deal.
Okay.
And we understand that it will be a little more challenging for some people to get licensed, but in the end, it is much easier than going through a BPOC, right?
Oh, yes.
And I think that most of them don't realize those training requirements when they come here, and then it becomes more difficult on the back end. They're on a deadline, or they can't get appointed, or something can't occur because their license is in compliance. So it will actually be simpler if they do it all at once. And we've discussed ways to make sure that some of those courses are available. I know that 1850 is one of the ones that can be challenging to find at times, a 40-hour in-person class. And so we want to make sure that we know that class is available, that we're not creating a bottleneck.
Yes, and I'm seeing that in my training with, it's in the BPOC now, so I'm not getting as many students anymore that need that. And so it's been hard for people to call me and go, hey, I need canine encounters. Well, it's hard for me to put one on for 1 or 2 people. So and again, I know the de-escalation and the CIT 40 has to be in person, but some of those other ones, I thought we could possibly incorporate them in the supplemental peace officer course too, so they can satisfy that.
And this is something else we've discussed in compliance moving forward, obviously with the cycle requirements in particular classes being required, is looking at where not only what officers are deficient, but where they are, and creating hotspot maps so training providers could put on classes in the areas where they're needed, right? So I know in El Paso, there were end of last cycle, there were certain people that are having trouble finding certain classes. And if somebody knew that they were there and wants to provide the class there, they can. And those are the things that we've talked about as the next step past what we're doing now, right? I think we've made a huge step forward, and then at the end, when we have particular classes, we can identify those needs and give people the opportunity to address those.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. Well, we know you've been busy.
Yes, ma'am, I can say that with absolute certainty. It's been a busy time for all of us, and the good news is that we've had a tremendous team with support from you all, and we've got good things to report from this session so far. Starting with, there's a website that tracks all things Texas Capitol called Quorum Report, and they have a countdown to the end of session up on their website as of this week that's at 39 days, 13 hours, and 43 minutes as of right now. But aside from that, so there have been, our bill count for bills that specifically involve TCOLE in some way or another, we're now at 78 bills. 30 of those include newly developed, newly mandated, or modified training requirements. So by no means is that to say that all of them will pass. But I think it's safe to say that at least some of them will. And some of them haven't been moving through the process, so we will keep a close eye on those. We've provided resource testimony on several of them, and look forward to continuing to work with the bill authors as they move through the process. The majority of our focus this session has been on two things, and that's our sunset process and the budget. Both of those are moving along with our sunset bill, as Director Beecham had said earlier, having made its way out of the Senate this week and now goes over to the House. The budget bill has been voted out of both chambers and will now begin its final negotiation between the Senate and House versions. So we will be keeping a close eye on all of those things as they go along. And there's been a couple of other major themes, I think, to legislation as it relates to TCOLE interests this session. School safety, of course, understandably is a large one. Active shooter training, I think it's safe to say, is going to end up being a mandate for officers. The extent to which still needs to be worked out in legislation, but we've been working with our partners over at Alert, all collectively and collaboratively getting ready for whatever mandates may come out. I think there's also been a focus on transparency in a lot of different forms. For example, last week there were a couple of bills heard that would give the families of individuals involved in active shooter situations greater transparency to maybe get them some additional closure, access to records and things like that following a tragic event that maybe they didn't previously have access to. But that also includes one of the items that's in our sunset bill that's been part of the discussion for many months now, which is having an officer search page or function on the TCOLE website. We had been discussing that with legislators. It looks like we will be getting some resources to be able to build that out and do so in a safe and secure way for everybody involved. And it would, as a side byproduct, allow quicker access to information that was already readily available through the open records process, but required that extra step at this time of submitting that open records process and having our staff, carry those out. Which, as we've been saying, last year we did 7,100 open records requests, and I would call about 80% of those for personal status reports that we routinely give out. And so this would be a way for people to be able to get that in a more immediate fashion, and as a side byproduct, relieve some of that off of our open records staff. Along those lines, as many of you are aware, we had a vacancy in that position for a little bit, and Sarah Beth Barksdale has taken over the reins and has been doing a tremendous job in that role. She's already got her processes in place, and the inbox has been very well managed by her. I want to give a specific thanks to Sarah Flott, Sarah Thornton, and Chris Verity for their work in the intervening period. It's a big job. It's an important job. And so making sure that we've got that good relationship with the requesters, with the media, with attorneys and the public. We want to make sure that we're doing that well and properly, and so I want to thank all of them for their work there. In other news, of course, you've all received an invitation for the Peace Officers Memorial that will be next Sunday evening. I know some of you are going to be able to be there, and we look forward to that. There are going to be 58 fallen officers being honored, as well as 9 historical. A lot of those, and we've got a few additional to go over in one of the next agenda items, are still remaining COVID cases that are being processed through the state benefits system. As we've talked about before, we rely on ERS, which provides benefits to the fallen next of kin for medical cases because they do such a deep and wide review of those. We rely on their determination. So there were many to go through, and so they're still working their way through that. In addition to that, the Achievement Award ceremony we are planning for after the June meeting for that Friday, which is June 16th. One of the next agenda items as well is going to be your approval for the recipients for Valor, Professional Achievement, and Public Service. They have been reviewed internally by staff and by a panel of judges, and so we look forward to that ceremony. It's always a great way and a positive thing that we get to do to honor the amazing work done by our licensees. That is the end of my report, unless you have any questions for me.
Questions or comments?
I have a comment. I just want to have a little bit of discussion and highlight. I know it's been, you've received a lot of feedback, we'll say, given the transparency component to what's coming from legislation. I think it's inevitable that that is going to be required of us. Even if it were not required of us, I absolutely believe that it's something that we need to do. It's very important. Again, it's something that for us, given our technology issues, was kind of challenging to do other than through FOIA requests, right? So now that we do have the resources, again, I want to relay to our law enforcement officers that we absolutely take everyone's security very seriously, and their safety and their family's safety. That is of utmost importance to us. This is not a publication of where you live and what you do and what your schedule is. It's something that's probably going to look more akin to if you've ever looked up an attorney on the bar website. It'll give you some general information about them and have a green dot or red dot, right, saying this person is in compliance or they're not. And so it's a way for the public just to be privy to that information. So again, for those officers and agents and everyone out there who are doing undercover work and things like that, obviously that's being taken into consideration as well. So we are looking at it. I know you all are looking at it very closely, and you are having those in-depth discussions with the legislators who are carrying that transparency portion of legislation. So I didn't want to kind of skip over that without bringing that to everyone's attention out there.
Thank you for that.
Okay. And Brian, we'll move on to your report.
Good morning, Commissioners. You have in your packet the normal financial report, including expenditures and revenue. We are now in our third quarter of the fiscal year, and I'd like to quickly highlight some of the things we've been working on and some of the things that we have completed. Under our HR operations, we've hired 12 new employees so far this fiscal year, and currently we have 2 job openings posted that we're looking to fill. One of the things that struck me about the last commission meeting is in almost all of our direct reports, we made mention of job openings or vacancies. And as you've heard so far, we've been able to make a lot of progress in that area, including hiring 3 just this month. So with those new people, we're really looking forward to continuing progress on our mission with their help. In financial operations, Our third school marshal grant, we are 99% complete with it, at about $300,000 spent and $4,500 remaining. We have a fourth school marshal grant lined up that would get us through the end of the fiscal year. And there is good news on the school marshal funding front in both introduced bills, the House and the Senate. Resources were given to us for more stable funding rather than grant funding. We would be able to receive 2 FTEs and the resources for several school marshal classes per year. Since our last meeting, we hit the century mark having completed 100 fiscal notes. We conducted an agency risk assessment, completed a certification of binding encumbrances, worked on school marshal reimbursements, performed border security and other financial reports, as well as worked and hired and trained those new agency staff. We're currently still working on fiscal notes. We've got quite a few in the queue, and they pop up all the time. We're tracking legislation, working on a disaster federal funds report, working on agency procurements, improving our invoicing process, improving our employee onboarding process, and we're also especially reviewing legislation that would be effective this fiscal year, such as the supplemental bill, which is Senate Bill 30. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Madam Chair, I'll trade you the 100 for mine. Fiscal notes, the committee substitute for sunset, have y'all finished that fiscal note?
Yes, we have. Yes.
Okay. When, just not for now, can you send that to me later?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Or actually, just send me the link if they have it posted. I don't know if they have it posted or not. Thank you. I have nothing else. Thank you.
Okay, and that concludes our staff reports. Did you have anything else?
I just want to add, thank you, Madam Chair, commissioners and executive staff and everyone in the audience, that a lot of the discussion, what we've discussed resources, IT resources, both what the legislature has certainly helped us with in the past. We thank them for everything they've done, and certainly what we're asking them to do for us now. At the end of the day, we're looking at transparency and ease of use for our licensees, the regulated community, and the public. Let's take, for example, the TCOLE, the situation it's in versus where it was in the past. Again, when we seek more resources or we seek more IT help or more full-time employees, it's usually from a posture of we're seeking parity with other state licensing agencies. And events where we get a TCOLE page and a licensee can look up exactly what courses they're missing, what their hours are, things of that nature, that is on par with the medical board, the pharmacy board, the State Bar of Texas, and likewise the proposed outwardly facing public data lookup. It's the same for the medical board, the pharmacy board, again, the State Bar. And I think, again, those are kind of the overarching principles that both what we've received in the past and what we'll continue to do in the future. So I just wanted to make that note to kind of tie a bow on everything we've discussed.
I make a motion that we.
Hold on, I have one more comment.
Is there one more?
John, I want to thank you for your leadership in a challenging and difficult role, being interim. And I want to thank all of you as leaders of your teams, as well as all of the TCOLE staff. Y'all have stepped up. And just listening here today, y'all have been so thorough and so strategic and so thoughtful in what you're doing. You have a plan, you have goals, and as Commissioner Burris mentioned, I mean, we're going at a rapid pace. Y'all are just doing a fantastic job in your roles. We're very thankful and grateful to all of you. We appreciate you more than we could possibly express to you, and just thank you for the wonderful job that all of you are doing.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have a motion regarding the reports?
I make a motion to accept the reports as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. we're going to move to agenda item number 4, and Jessica's going to talk to us about the paperless project. Did you break it?
I know, no, I can do this. I can handle a microphone. As of March 1st, 2023, TCOLE only accepts L1s, L1Ts, and F5s through electronic submission through TCLEDs. We are no longer accepting the paper forms, and this hasn't seemed to have caused a problem before implementing this. We made sure everyone had access to TCLEDs so that they had the means of submitting it electronically, and this is one of many steps towards a paperless initiative.
Questions or comments?
Good job.
Okay, we'll move on to agenda item number 5, which I'll turn over to our interim director to discuss the basic peace officer course and the addition of the alert level 1 training.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioners, this is an informational item here. As we discussed yesterday in the workshop, currently in the legislature, there are several paths towards ultimately making Alert Level 1 training part of the basic peace officer course. The purpose of the agenda item, as I said, is informational, and we wanted to let the commissioners, regulated community, and the public know that TCOLE staff is moving and posturing itself towards fulfilling however that means is achieved through the legislature. So we will be prepared and to execute the will of the legislature ultimately.
Before moving on to agenda item number 7, we are going to take a, I'm sorry. We're going to cover agenda item number 6 before break. Discuss and take action to approve the recommendations for the Law Enforcement Achievement Awards. Gretchen.
Hello again, Commissioners. You have before you a list of nominees that have been recommended by staff and by the judging panel for Law Enforcement Achievement Awards in the areas of valor, public service, and professional achievement. Just to give you a couple of highlights, there's 41 officers representing 20 incidents from 16 agencies in the category of valor. For professional achievement, there are 7 officers representing 4 programs and 4 agencies. And in public service, there are 12 officers from 10 agencies nominated before you. Should you approve them, and I'd be happy to follow up with any information on any of them that you would like, but should you approve, the notifications, we'll start sending those out next week to go to the recipients, the nominators, and the chief administrators for the event scheduled for June 16th.
I make a motion to approve the recommendations as presented to us for the Law Enforcement Achievement Awards.
I second.
We have a motion and 2 or 3 seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes, and we are now going to take about a